hello and welcome to another episode of A View from the Top. I'm Adrian Cropley. A View from the Top is a regular podcast from the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, where I interview some of the world's leading communication professionals as we explore their career journey. Today I'm speaking face-to-face in Melbourne with Dr Anne Gregory, who is a visiting professor with the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, and is a professor for corporate communications at the University of Huddersfield in the UK, and has led numerous specialist research and consultancy programs for public and private sector clients. A former chair of the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management, and recently led the Global Capabilities Framework Research project, and is leading initiatives right now on identifying the capabilities for PR and communication professionals in our emerging world of big data and AI. So some big heavy-hitting topics, and I'm not going to jump straight into those topics because I'm going to talk to Anne about her career. So welcome to Melbourne, Anne, and it's always a great pleasure to catch up with you.
Well, it feels like a second home to me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I love it.
It sounds like we really do need to give you honorary citizenship of, certainly, if not Australia, Melbourne, because you are here often and working at the university here, and I'm sure they're thrilled to have you here as well.
Well, they're great colleagues, but also it's great to connect with the industry here.
Yeah.
And I've done some work with you, with IABC, with PRIA. It's great because actually the PR family is a big and extensive one, and we've got lots of issues in common, but we've also got lots of challenges that are going to give us great opportunities.
I know, and it's a great. We seem to, and I don't know how you get over the last few years, that family seems to have got closer together. We talked about globalization for years, but now you kind of feel it's real because we connect often. We connect with people in different parts of the world. I'm always following your travels, and you're all over the place, and I think you do the same with me. And we always take that opportunity to meet with people. But I'm going to take you back to where it all began for you. How did you start in communication?
A long time ago, and by complete accident. I did an undergraduate degree in philosophy and English. What do you do with a philosophy degree? I mean, there isn't much call for philosophies these days.
There's not, is there?
So I could have gone and sat on a pole in Egypt, I suppose, as some of the ancient philosophers did. But I'd always been interested in what makes people tick. And what I learnt in philosophy was about how to make arguments and how to construct compelling arguments, and reason and logic. But also, Aristotle was all about logos and pathos and empathy.
Yes.
And for many years, I'd wanted to be a journalist. Didn't quite turn out like that because my first job, I was a research assistant at the University of Leeds, where I was an alumnus. And I researched the impact of sound on hearing.
Oh.
And also I looked at why people got run over on roads. So a very, very strange background. So when I did the work on hearing loss and people going to discotheques and losing their hearing later in life, and band members losing their hearing, I actually had to crunch all the data for that.
Wow. Okay.
And all the interview stuff had to go into this computer that wouldn't work on Mondays. And it wouldn't work on Mondays because of the static electricity that had been building up over the weekend. And my job was to try and get this, and that's what we understood after time after time after time when I tried to reboot this computer. And talking to the computer manager there over many hours, it became apparent that they had a communication issue around people understanding what personal computing was all about. Right. And when this project came to an end, he asked me if I'd like to be the information officer for this little computer unit. And I began by writing guides on how to do simple computing.
Oh, wow.
and talking to people about this new thing, which was personal computing. Microsoft was just coming on this. That's how long ago it was, Adrian. And that was my first job.
Well,
being the information officer for a computer unit.
I have to say that parallel is quite amazing, because one of my first jobs was working on an IBM mainframe in a computer room, the room set up that had all of the spinning wheels and things like that. So I absolutely relate to that. Did you ever find out what was the problem with people not hearing, or when they crossed the road, what was the issue?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and part of the work that I did there was zebra crossings, pelican crossings. We used to have zebra crossings, which were just the lines in the road, and then they put lights on the zebra crossings. And we found out that some of the kids in particular could not predict speed. And it was nothing to do with intelligence, we tested for that. But they just had sort of some motor deficiency, which meant that they couldn't predict the speed of traffic, so they'd step out too late.
Yes.
Even when they were doing the, look right, look left, look right again. And that's why we have lights now. That's why they were initially put there. We have lights now because there's too much traffic on the road, but that's a different story. But it was to stop the traffic, so kids in particular, and some adults as well, could get across the roads.
So research was in your blood very early.
It was, yes. I loved it. Research that made a difference.
Well, it did, yes. And I'm going to get to that parallel as we get into the role of communication professionals and research and why that makes a difference, because I really like to encourage people on that area of research. So what are some of the jobs that you've done through your career? Okay. Where did it go to?
Well, while I was working as the information officer for this computer unit, the BBC was actually in the building across the road. And as I say, I'd had this passion about journalism.
Yeah.
And I knew a producer at the BBC, and they put on some training courses, which were how to make you into a BBC journalist. And I did the course, and I got a job.
Oh, wow.
So I then went into the BBC and became sort of producer, also a researcher, and did some presenting as well. And I guess the thing that came out of that job was, how do you ask questions? The key to a good interviewer is knowing the right questions to ask and putting the person at the other end at ease. As you do. Okay.
Ask all the questions. So I'm hoping I'm going to ask some really good questions as we go through this. So, keep going. Where did it go to from there?
So from there, I was a freelancer at the BBC, and life was pretty precarious. And I saw this advert as a public relations manager for a bank. It's called Bradford and Bingley Building Society, which has ceased to exist now because it went bust in the crash. But I don't think I personally was responsible.
You weren't responsible for that,
No. And I guess one of the lessons I took from working in financial services is that you have to tell stories to connect with people, because financial stuff is dry and boring.
Yes.
So I guess that's one of the things I learned there. And then I went on to be Director of Communications for a university. So here's the university
Here we
connection
go. The
coming
connection
through.
comes in now.
Yeah. And I guess what developed there was curiosity, because there was a whole load of stuff about which I knew nothing. So you can see where this is going.
Yes.
So asking questions, storytelling, curiosity, and then I moved into consultancy.
Right.
And there I learnt about flexibility. You've got to be flexible, you've got to be customer focused. So I just think I had the most brilliant training for when I went to the light side, which is when I went into university, into the ivory tower. And I had all that hinterland with me, and I was passionate about not leaving it behind, because I love our profession. And the reason I went into university was because this was in the the mid 1990s in the UK. There were only a couple of courses in public relations.
Right.
And in consultancy, I got really frustrated about the fact, consultancy friends, about educating the client over and over. You go in and then they'd say, please do this. And you think, please ask me to do something more than a bit of media relations.
Yes.
And, you can change your organisations if you knew what public relations was really about.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to change what I do in order to try and make some sort of little bit of difference in the profession. Not me personally, but the people who were coming on those courses, were thinking differently and asking some difficult questions about what sort of career am I going to have.
Yeah.
And it was lovely to be a part of that.
But isn't it nice that you were able to advise people from having that experience externally in consultancy, in business, and now being back in academia and being able to advise people the right way? You've never come across as a career academic to me. I'm not sure whether there's a stereotype for one, but never come across it. It's always been based on great experiences. You come back, and obviously your passion to actually help the profession be better. And I guess that's why you got involved with organisations like CIPR in the UK and the Global Alliance. I'd love to ask you a little bit about those, but what's some of the lessons that you have learnt through doing some of those jobs?
Yeah, well, I guess there were certain things that I took from it, like the storytelling and the curiosity. But I think the lesson is, for me, well, there are a number of lessons, which is about ask yourself the tough questions.
Right.
So questioning is about asking yourself the tough questions. And I think sometimes as a profession, we've not done that.
Right.
We've been content to earn the money.
Yes.
I'm not saying that about everybody at all. But sometimes, and I had to face this in consultancy and moved away from consultancy because I couldn't do it any longer, which was about the integrity of the profession and about the ethics of the profession and about what is it that we're going to do that's going to make a difference to organisations, to make them think differently and do things differently.
Yeah.
And so I've got the most wonderful job because I'm paid to ask those tough questions. And I'm paid then to try and share some of the learning that we do together because, as you say, I've always walked hand in hand with the practice. So I learn from the practice constantly, and hopefully because I'm paid to reflect on what I see and what I observe, and by asking hopefully the right questions, trying to work hand in hand with the practice to make it move forward. And that's been my driving concern, both when I was president of the CIPR and where I was chair of the Global Alliance. How do we make this practice move forward?
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful opportunity that we have, and we've only got one shot at it.
Yep.
So you better make the best of it. So I think that's been the thing for me about asking the tough questions.
Yeah.
And the second thing is sticking at the knitting.
Ah, yes.
So when you think that, we suffer from a lot of setbacks, and in our profession it seems to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But keep on going.
Yeah.
Keep on going and drive on through. And sometimes you might feel a bit like a voice in the wilderness, but everything goes round in circles, and at some stage the questions keep being asked again. And I see it more as a spiral rather than a series of setbacks, that we move forward in a spiral.
Yeah.
We go around in a circle, but every time it's a notch upwards. And so just keep on doing it. And I think that's been a big lesson for me.
Brilliant. It's really interesting because I did a View from the Top with Jim Schaefer last month, and it was really interesting because we were having a very similar conversation around this spiral. It becomes a little bit cyclical, and you keep asking those same questions. And one of the things we were talking about is how communication professionals demonstrate value within their organisations. And we kept reflecting on, why do we keep being in this spiral of trying to get relevance and value within our organisations? And I know some of the things that you've been doing, and certainly with the work you did on the Global Alliance around building competencies, and how is that focus starting to help? And this is an opportunity for you to talk a little bit about that work.
I think one of our problems is we've allowed other people to define what our value is, and it gets reduced to a number. And we have our eyes on the outside. So if I look at organisations like the International Integrated Reporting Council and the work that they've been doing with huge organisations, the likes of Coca-Cola, the Big Four, all the accounting professions, about how do we define value?
Yeah.
And it's more than the number at the bottom of the financial balance sheet. And they've come up with this notion of capitals. the 6 capitals that constitute value. And the interesting thing about one of those specifically is around relationships and what's our job all about.
Right.
Building relationships, about the brand, about reputation. Where's our space? Well, it's right there. And one of the things that they've actually identified is through the work of an organisation called Ocean Tomo in the States.
Yeah.
Ocean Tomo prepare organisations for flotation on the stock exchange.
Oh, okay.
So they have to come up with a value of that organisation, and in order to price your shares. And their work has identified that if we wind back the clock to about 1975, tangible asset value for the organisation, that's things you can kick, the money, the buildings, vehicles and all the rest of it, was worth about 87%.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, the latest research that they've done shows that intangible assets are worth 87%
There you go.
of the value.
There's the swap.
There's the swap. And why do we want to be playing in that 13%, which is all about numbers and finance, when what we contribute is quality of relationships, reputation, the ability of organisations to have the culture where their intellectual capital of the organisation is released, and we're involved in. So, value. Don't talk to me about that, Adrian, because I'm going to reply 87%.
Yes.
That's the value we add.
There we go.
So let's start having those conversations.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think they're the kind of stats we need communication professionals, PR professionals to actually talk to their organisations about and stand firm on it.
It is. And CEOs get this stuff, because it's really interesting. There's a piece of research I'm desperate to do, which is why have CEOs got the sack in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, but I reckon that a very high percent is because they've damaged the reputation of their organisation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some, it will still be the financials, of course.
Yes.
But if you think about people like Mr. Winterkorn and VW in the news just this week,
That's right.
he's in real trouble. And a lot of that is about, of course, it's about malfeasance and cheating the regulator, but it's about the reputational damage that has been done to VW. And CEOs get this stuff.
Yes.
And so, I think we've got a big contribution to make in keeping organisations safe.
Yes.
Because we're connected with trends and issues in society, and we know not just what compliance is all about. Well, we should do, and that's one of our problems. We don't always know that. But what the sort of covert responsibilities and accountabilities are that organisations have, that now ordinary people are saying, I don't like what you're doing, not because it's against the law, but because you're a big organisation and I am holding you to account because of your behaviour.
And you should be doing better.
And should be doing better.
I absolutely get that. And this is a really nice segue into some of the work that you're doing now. And I'd love to explore a little bit more around, and I'll ask this question in terms of what do you think the gaps are right now for communication professionals? We start looking towards the future, and we'll start talking a little bit about AI and big data, and one of the other reasons you're here in Melbourne. But what do you, in the research that you did and the capabilities, what do you think are some of our biggest gaps right now we need to fill as communication professionals?
Okay, so what we did, this is research that took place on 6 continents, so it's a global project. And we talked to educators and to employers and to professionals about what's the best they could be.
Yes.
So this is not backward looking, this is not about what they do now, but if the potential of the profession was released, what's the best we could be? And that's what capability is all about. Take away the barriers.
Yes.
And it's amazing. And I've got here in front of me the Global Capability Framework, 11 key capabilities, which they're sort of the irreducible statements that define our profession, if you like. And I look at these and I'm just amazed because the breadth of responsibility that we have is huge and the depth is huge as well. But if I just pick one or two here about which we might call specific communication capabilities? Well, of course, it is about communicating across platforms. It's also about aligning communication with organisational values and purpose. But it's not just about that.
Right.
Because that sounds as if communication is subservient to all organisation values and purpose. The key thing is that we have to be involved in actually helping define those. Come back to what we were saying before, which is about what permissions do we need from society to operate? And who has the skills to negotiate the position of an organisation in the world today?
Yeah.
It's us.
Yes.
Because we're connected with stakeholders and we understand trends, well, we should be.
Yes.
And we understand the trends and we understand the big issues and we know how our organisation is not going to be a net contributor to the problems of the world, but how we can contribute to solving the issues of the world. And if we get that trick right, then the organisational licence to operate will be affirmed.
Yeah.
And who's best placed to do that work? We are.
We are. Yeah.
Because we're the connected people. So, there's a huge lot under these 11 capabilities. But also, just picking up on that, because there's sort of glimpses of ethics there.
Yes.
Again, under the professional capabilities, it's, to work within an ethical framework. And everybody will say, oh, yeah, ethics is a good thing. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Anne. Adrian, ethics is good.
It's great, yep.
And then you say, and you'll have done this, Adrian, put your hand up in this room full of people to be trained. Who thinks ethics is a good thing and who thinks it's our bag? All the hands go up. Who's had ethical training?
Yes. All the hands go down.
All the hands go down. And and we claim these roles for ourselves. And this is why we need to call this out, really. But we don't actually, and we're terrible at this, about training ourselves. We say we should have a place at the table, but we don't prepare ourselves for that place at the table. And we keep saying, they don't understand us, but we don't understand them. And that's our biggest issue.
Yeah. And is it also about being able to have the tough conversations with the exec too? Because it's okay when we're in a room full of communication and PR professionals to say, oh, yes, we challenge this stuff. But do we really? When we're in front of the executive around that executive table, do we really call them into question? Because, I know from experience in doing that, it's a terrifying place to be in.
It is.
Because you've really got to take people on a journey of mindset and understanding right and wrong when it comes to communication.
Yes, absolutely. And talking to them about the impact of the decisions around the table. Are you really going to do this? This is one. But importantly as well, talking their language. So we were talking about value before.
Yes.
So at the board, say CEOs and board members get this. Do you want your organisation to be sustainable in the long run? Let me talk to you about how we preserve our asset base here. Not the financial asset base alone. We might have a discussion about that. But about the most precious thing that we've got, which is our reputation, and about preserving our licence to operate. Now, when you're talking to the FD, you might have to talk about money and the return on investment, and that's legit, But actually, there are other ways in which we can frame our arguments, which have tremendous power.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thanks for picking up on those. And what I would like to do now is a couple of those, I guess, capabilities we're now building as we travel into this new frontier of AI and big data, and you're doing a presentation in Melbourne about that. What's some of the things that you are going to be talking about, and what do you think are some of the challenges for communication professionals in this AI big data space? And I think ethics was one part of it, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The datafication of everything is huge at the moment, and again, as a profession, I sound really negative tonight. I don't mean to
Not
do
at
that.
all.
We get seduced by toys. And we're seduced, if we're not careful, by AI toys next.
Yes.
And just because we can, we forget to ask the question, what's the right thing to do here, and how do we use this technology? And what I'm going to talk about is the impact really of datafication in three areas of our working life. And I don't think I'm going to be popular, but we have to ask the hard questions.
Yes.
So, in the corporate sphere, datafication and AI means that corporates have enormous power because they know a lot about me and you and ordinary people. Cambridge Analytica had 5,000 data points on the electors in the US.
Yes.
So do large corporates. In fact, a lot more than that. And so we have to be that voice within the organisation that says, well, how are we using this information?
Yes.
And it's not just about data protection. That's the easy bit. It's the power it gives us, to manipulate people in all sorts of ways, from getting them to buy our products because we know how to frame the arguments to persuade them to do that, but also the power it gives us to do everything. So that means that what are we going to do about our workforce? Are we going to replace everybody? Is it ethical and moral to do that, to do people out of work, just so that we can increase our bottom line? And for whom? Is it to do more good in the world, or is it to enrich our stakeholders, our shareholders? So, and who's going to be the guardian of the algorithms that we put in place? We know already that algorithms have bias.
Yes.
They're written by men, largely.
Yes.
So there's a gender balance in algorithms. It's interesting, some of the latest work on driverless cars. Driverless cars are colourblind. And there's some work coming through now that says that they don't see black men. Well, why is that?
Right. Yeah, there's an interesting...
Where's the filming been done?
Yeah.
How are the algorithms been framed? So, and who's going to challenge these algorithms and the basis on which organisations make decisions?
Yeah.
I think it's got to be us.
Yeah.
Again, somebody's got to do it. Maybe this ethical guardian role is going to be a real one at last.
maybe that we are coming into the own, because that's where we're going.
Absolutely. And governments, power of governments, and in the AI space is going to be huge. It worries me. I've got to be careful about what I say.
Yes.
But there are some governments around the world now that if you go to the supermarket, they know exactly what you're buying.
Yes.
And there are governments around the world, and we know that information is being used to monitor their populations, and where they go and who they connect with and what they're saying.
Yeah.
And this is a huge power for governments.
And it was interesting, I think, in the Chinese government were looking at that social score and combining it with CCTV cameras in China. And
that's right.
Then they know who's there, where they are, and literally what is their social score.
And if you don't have the right social score, you find suddenly you can't buy a train ticket.
Yes.
Because they don't want you. They want you to stay in one place so they can monitor you. And this is quite scary stuff.
Yeah.
So power of government, and then even in the civic sphere, again, look at the power of algorithms. Normal will be the majority.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do about those dissonant voices? Who are legitimate voices? Who's going to give them a voice? Who's going to represent them? Is that a job for us?
Absolutely.
To say, hang on a minute, just because the majority think this, there are other alternative points of view. And the problem with algorithms is that, entropy, it means that actually the small voices get loster and loster and loster.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
Because of the mass of data. Whereas before, we didn't have that
even
data around the norm, but we could hear them.
Yes.
Now they're going to disappear. So I think we've got some big questions to ask ourselves, and this is connecting, government, civic sphere and government sphere, and asking, well, what sort of world do we want? And we've got a role to play here.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think back, where our conversation started today, one of the first things you said is you learn to ask good questions. And I think we all need to be able to learn to ask those of the organisations that we are working with. And also, when we look at new technologies coming along, there's going to be a lot of good as well. So we often see too that the definition of AI is the robots are coming and the Terminator is going to destroy us all and all of those sorts of things. And I think we've got to, as communication professionals, be able to balance that out, don't we?
Absolutely, because, if you look in the area of health, for example, being able to predict disease patterns, if you look at the area of justice, to ensure that there's consistency from judges on the decisions that they make that affect people's lives, about whether people go to prison or not. We can weed out. There are bad judges as well. We can weed them out.
Yes.
All these things are really good. And being able to do preventative training, as we know, for some populations who, because of their life circumstances, are probably actually going to be, easy prey for people who want to introduce them to drugs and crime. Well, we can begin to put in place, programs that are actually going to give them positive things to do.
Absolutely.
And these are all great developments. And you're right. I mean, as I say, I'm going to get labelled here as a naysayer and as a doom-monger. I think we have to ask those hard questions, but we've also got to promote the undoubted good.
Yes.
That we can put AI to.
And I think that that is our role, and that's always something that you've espoused is looking at things, and this is why you do it from a research point of view. What is it telling us? What are we seeing? What are we hearing? And then let's work with that and help develop solutions for organisations. But most of all, be the voice, be the conscience sometimes of the organisation. I would like to just invite you to any last tips for communication professionals. So you've looked at your career and you're still only part the way through it. You gave me that look. But it's, what are some of those sage bits of advice you would give to any communication professional now as, what they should be doing?
Well, I guess follow your passion, because you'll be good at things that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
I've talked a lot, and I think a key is listening.
Yeah.
Just being ever alert. There's never too much information. There's never any wasted information. Don't have any regrets about making mistakes. Try things, experiment, and you'll fall down. But you know what? You can pick yourself up, or somebody will pick you up, because somebody who's prepared to take risks and, think out there adds tremendous value. You don't, change the world by being average.
No.
So, get out there. And for young people who are coming into this profession, I am so jealous because I think the world is your oyster. At long last, people are waking up to this communication thing.
Yeah.
And I think we have a huge leadership role in front of us. And what we have to do is grab the opportunity and understand, do all that training that all those business leaders do, and speak their language and show that actually that by having that sort of communication lens on life, there's something enormously enriching about that. Because at the end of the day, two things I would say. There are no such things as organisations without communication. They don't exist. They don't exist.
No.
You've heard me say this before. You can take the buildings away, you can take the money away. But if people don't communicate, there is no such thing as an organisation. And you, young professionals in this game, have got an absolute opportunity to be leaders because the moment is now.
Yes.
And I'd really emphasise that. And then two trivial things to finish on. When I worked in consultancy, the guy that I worked for was an incredibly tough guy. And he had lots of things which were very difficult to work with. But he also taught me two really important lessons. And they're very simple lessons. And the first one was, Anne, always make the phone call you don't want to make.
Yes.
Because that tells you that something's wrong. And fix it. Fix relationships, because we're in the business of relationships. And if you don't want to talk to somebody, something's wrong. And it will come back to bite. And it's the right thing to do. Fix things, And then the second thing he told me is never go to a client with a problem that doesn't have a solution. Take the solution with you. And if you're that person in your organisation that identifies the problem, but also has the solution, you will be worth your weight in gold. Because you're right, Adrian, people often won't name the problem.
No.
And they won't say, this is what's wrong here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But also, if you've got the fix and you've thought it through, you are the diamond in that organisation. And those are 2 lessons that I learnt when I was quite young.
Yep.
And that I've tried to carry with me.
And kept them right through, right? Yeah,
Tried to.
They're the best lessons. Well done, and it's just been amazing talking to you today, and sharing so much. I know we didn't just talk career today, but we talked about all of the work that you're doing and the research and where we're heading. So I know people would have got some great value out of today. So thank you very much for spending the time with me.
My pleasure. It always is, Adrian. Always get more value from you than you do from me.
Oh, no, never. Thank you, Anne. And thank you for everybody joining us today. That was it for today's episode of A View from the Top. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you and goodbye.